Марина. Так, давайте проверим звук. Марина Мишункина, Марина Николаевна, нажмите микрофон свой. Что-нибудь скажите. Вот слышим?
Да, отлично слышно.
Отлично. Хорошо.
Приветствую всех.
Да, приветствую. Прекрасно. Вот вижу. Коллеги, добрый день. Я думаю, что мы, наверное, можем уже начать. Я смотрю, что много участников уже подключились, кто-то в процессе. У нас сегодня много иностранных товарищей, есть онлайн, кто-то в записи. В связи с тем, что все-таки мы в Зуме и большая разница во времени, кто-то из коллег сделал запись предварительно, мы ее услышим. У нас сегодня большая география от Австралии. Мы благодарны Jorgu Imbergeru за то, что он с нами. Лауреат Stockholm Water Prize. География распространяется до Бразилии, Колумбии, что совершенно замечательно. Также у нас есть и коллеги из Иркутска, Красноярска, что тоже здорово. Наш круглый стол призван расширить лесную климатическую повестку и объединить усилия для достижения главной цели – сохранения лесов. Регламент у нас следующий. Мы, во-первых, ограничены в Зуме примерно 2,5–3 часами, считая техническую подготовку, основные доклады до 10 минут, записи иностранных коллег до 6 минут, выступление во второй части стола примерно 2–3 минуты, довольно много записавшихся предварительно. Если кто-то хочет еще выступить, прошу писать в чат. При наличии времени мы обязательно дадим выступить. И порядок следующий. У всех микрофоны отключены. У нас есть определенный регламент. Согласно регламенту будем включать микрофон выступающему. Пожалуйста, не забудьте у себя нажать микрофончик, чтобы вас было слышно. Я буду называть не только выступающему, но и следующему, кому приготовиться, чтобы можно было сориентироваться. Ну и, надеюсь... Нет у нас перевода?
Минутку пусть подождут.
Ну хорошо, мы сейчас пока начнем. Или нет? Что у нас нет перевода?
Надо микрофоны.
Так, секундочку. Как обычно, Zoom нужно немножко повозиться. Сейчас мы подключим переводчиков. Они нас почему... Все, коллеги, продолжаем. Я бы хотел начать с того, что предоставить вступительное слово Sharoikina Елене Акинфовне, руководитель комиссии Общественной палаты Российской Федерации по экологии и защите окружающей среды. У нас, напомню, наш круглый стол, он проходит под эгидой Общественной палаты. И хочу поблагодарить Елену Акинфовну за то, что как только она стала руководителем комиссии, наши темы активно включились в повестку, и на сегодняшний день она активно участвует в решении проблем сохранения лесов. Елена Акинфовна, за это большое спасибо. Пожалуйста, вам слово. Пожалуйста, не забудьте нажать микрофончик. Пожалуйста, Нажимаете микрофончик, мы вас слушаем.
Could you please switch on your microphone, and we're listening to you. Okay. Oh, good.
Я сейчас активно слышу перевод. Я не знаю, должна ли я слышать перевод у себя в ушах.
I can hear translation. I don't know whether I'm supposed to hear translation.
Я, наверное, тогда... Или меня будет хуже слышно. Так. Сейчас. Как быть? Значит,
Сейчас, одну секундочку, сейчас мы настроим. Здесь, по идее, у нас должен быть свой канал.
Просто, друзья, я не смогу говорить, потому что у меня настолько громко в ушах звучит слова переводчика, что, к сожалению, невозможно будет формулировать ничего. Либо я предлагаю, чтобы не терять время, поступить так. Это будет не синхронный перевод, я буду говорить, а потом будет перевод.
Нет, давайте мы сейчас секундочку возьмем техническую паузу и попробуем наладить канал, потому что английский канал должен идти параллельно, не связано с русским. Я секундочку.
Где мы это выбираем? Я сделала так. Меня слышно? Мне теперь вообще ничего не слышно. Это нормально?
Вот, меня можете включить, да? Коллеги, вот внизу строчка язык, там, где глобус нарисован. Надо для тех, кто хочет, чтобы было по-русски, выбрать русский, а иностранцам выбрать английский. И тогда каналы будут разделены. У всех получилось? Все нашли?
У меня, по-моему, получилось.
Угу. Все, тогда возобновляем наш стол. Пожалуйста, идите.
Да, здравствуйте, дорогие друзья. Прошу прощения за небольшую заминку. На самом деле это первая международная конференция, которую мы делаем. И я хочу за это сказать Владимиру Морозову огромное спасибо. Это полностью его инициатива, полностью его разработка, потому что темой проблемой леса он занимается уже не первый год, возглавляет общественный совет при российском ведомстве. И на самом деле я считаю, что во многом благодаря его личной позиции вот в дискурсе социальном появляется как раз тема лесов как климаторегулирующих. Я сейчас хочу сказать очень коротко об общественной палате, на площадке которой мы собираемся для... Если аналог... институция, которая состоит на треть из тех людей, которые по приглашению президента участвуют. Это представители как раз очень важные, значимые представители, значит, общества. Также он состоит из представителей всех российских регионов и на треть состоит из представителей НКО, организаций, которые являются полностью независимыми от государства, которые являются некоммерческими организациями. И на сегодняшний день Общественная палата Российской Федерации является структурой, которая объединяет все НКО по различным тематикам. Наша комиссия работает с проблемой экологии, и на площадках Общественной палаты мы обсуждаем темы вместе со всеми и российскими организациями, и российскими органами власти, и также активно участвуют международные организации экологические, такие как Greenpeace, Фонд дикой природы. И я хочу, конечно же, сказать, что на самом деле это очень интересный инструмент, который позволяет решать и многие вопросы. Я очень надеюсь, что результатом нашего сегодняшнего круглого стола будут какие-то практические рекомендации, которые мы, возможно, сможем распространить по всему миру. А может быть, и стоило бы написать такой манифест, обращение ко всему миру по итогам нашего круглого стола. Давайте это тоже обсудим. Конечно, в России сосредоточено больше 20% мировых лесов, и это уникальное богатство. И, конечно же, не случайно Россия вот сегодня выступает инициатором этого круглого стола, потому что мы все видим, что происходит с окружающим миром, мы все видим, что происходит с климатом, поэтому, конечно, возлагаем большие надежды именно на научное сообщество. Мы со своей стороны понимаем, что очень важно в дискуссию включить и экологических активистов, которые эту тему сделают максимально популярной. И в хорошем смысле слова, здоровом смысле слова, мы все вместе должны воспроизвести необходимое давление как на государственные структуры разных во всем мире, так и на бизнес-структуры. Безусловно, в мире эта проблема изменения климата, она, в общем-то, является очень острой, и мы видим, что существует Парижское соглашение.
And of course, there is the Paris Accord, and unfortunately, not all of the countries are joining it. But the position of the Russian Federation.
Сохранять наш климат, и будем надеяться, что все вместе сумеем сделать полезное и хорошее.
To work together in order to reach that aim.
And I pass the microphone to Vladimir for continuing our conference. Now I give the floor to Grigoriev Alexey, Director of State Policy in managing special preserved territories and the Baikal territory. He has worked in the Federal Agency for Forestry. He knows very well what the forest is and has been protecting forests for many years. Good afternoon, Mr. Morozov, Ms. Sharoikina. Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for raising this question, this issue, and for taking such a balanced approach. And a couple of words on my vision of this. When working on the draft agenda on forestation, it's very important to take the global system into account when we keep in mind that it is not just a resource, timber, but a very important factor for protecting climate and nature. It is important not to infringe on the size of the territories of forests, but also not to reduce the territories covered with forest. It is also important to mention the role of forests on the specially preserved territories, because the majority of them are presented are forests, but also they have natural peculiarities and unique landscape and natural
constellations.
In working out a new policy, it is important to work on particular legal issues and
и вообще ослабление их режима. Поэтому вот в таком направлении, я думаю, именно экологическом, именно с точки зрения оценки леса, понятия леса как главного климатообразующего, главного природоохранного, водоохранного фактора, и должны мы двигаться в разработке вот этих вот азов новой политики. Спасибо, Владимир Евгеньевич, у меня все.
Алексей Иванович, большое спасибо. Главный регулятор от исполнительной власти занимает схожую позицию с общественностью, это радует. Также в плане приветствий хотел бы передать приветствие всем участникам от Елены Васильевны Пановой, заместителя министра, который планировала принять участие в нашем мероприятии, но, к сожалению, не сложилось с ее регламентом сегодняшним. Вот, но она активно включена в решение лесных проблем, и мы ей за это тоже благодарны. Коллеги, идем дальше. Начинаем наши небольшие содоклады по теме. Начну я. Коллеги, международное профессиональное и научное сообщество ищут ответы на вопросы. Почему меняется климат? Почему пересыхают небольшие реки и мелеют большие? Почему некогда плодородные территории начинают опустыниваться, а другие подвержены постоянным водным катаклизмам? Почему становятся возможными природные пожары, охватывающие половину континента, как это произошло недавно в Австралии? Для получения ответа все больше и чаще начинают обращаться к теме роли лесов, как одном из базовых ресурсов естественной экосистемы в самовосстановлении в связи со все возрастающим антропогенным воздействием. Леса в мире, и Россия не является исключением, а скорее ярким подтверждением этого факта, до сих пор воспринимались и продолжают восприниматься в основном как месторождение природы.
So forests are playing a very important role in the changes in the climate. And once again, we need to pay special attention to the timber production, to the organization of these processes, and a lot of the natural environment is much more important than the artificially designed environment by people. So if the person, if a man is occupying the position of support for nature, that would be able to resolve a lot of problematic issues in the future. So it's very important to unite our efforts in trying to preserve the natural forests as the forests which pay a special, which contribute to the changes in the climate and to the water cycle. Currently, it is important to maintain the carbon balance in nature. And this is exactly what forests do by accumulating, being the source of carbon dioxide and at the same time the sink of carbon dioxide. The development of an ecosystem that will be relevant for the stabilization of climatic changes on a global scale is a highly important issue. It is very important to support the climatic sustainability, the sustainability of forests on Earth, irrespective of where they are situated and what categories they are. So the status of forests and preservation and conservation of forests should be raised to a very high level. If that shall not be done, maybe in 15 to 20 years, we're not going to be talking about the growth rates of the economy, but the topic on the agenda will be full degradation of the economy. It is going to be very difficult to fight fires on a global scale. We need to understand that it is important to pay special attention not only to conservation, but to forestation and planting new forests. And if this question is not resolved, then the problem of the survival of humanity will be a serious problem on the agenda. So therefore, I am calling upon our colleagues that are participating in this roundtable to draw up a document like a manifest to the representatives of different governments, calling upon the policymakers, scientists, academics, and those that are dealing with ecological topics to pay special attention to the preservation of forests. We need to start working as soon as possible, and we need to put across to the politicians and to the authorities the danger of postponing such issues. I would like to extend my gratitude to all those participating in the conference today. It is important to discuss these questions, work on the legal aspects, and organizing the discourse on the topic. There's a lot of positive work being done, and we cannot underestimate some of the amendments into the forest codes, into the forest code of the Russian Federation, for instance. So there has been a positive shift towards the preservation of forests, and currently it is important to legally confirm the separate legal status of natural forests, and this status has to be introduced into the law of the Russian Federation for the preservation of environment for future generations. Esteemed colleagues, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Romanovskaya Anna Anatolievna, PhD in biological sciences, head of the Institute of Global Climate and Ecology, named after academician Israel. And she's also the participant of the delegation of the Russian Federation in different international talks on the topics of the changes, of climatic changes. Anna Anatolievna will dwell on the subject of the carbon balance and adaptation of the potential of virgin forests. I would like to switch on the demonstration of the screen, please. Could the organizer please switch on the allow me to switch on my demonstration of the screen? Well, I might not be able to switch on. I might not be able to switch on the presentation. There we are.
Спасибо. Простите, да, еще тоже за определенную заминку.
I would like to extend my gratitude. Написано, что все идет на русском. Кто-то написал, что все идет на русском. Попробуй поговорить.
Well, it's truly an unprecedented thing that we have this issue considered in a broad format with those who negotiate, those who participate in the research of this issue to discuss this issue on the agenda. Well, just a remark that I want to make at the very beginning and discuss that with my colleagues in Extensio, that the role of forests and disturbed forests, those that are not that much disturbed or whatever name we give to them, is mainly the issue associated with climate regulation. We recently saw a publication from Boston Consulting Group. They spoke about millions and billions of dollars that is the forest worth, and 80% of Russian forest is their role in the climate. So I don't think that that's the right approach to think about forests only as a resource or only as a contributor to the climate. So in 2018, we had a very good review about the forests that have not yet been exposed to significant impact of human beings, with no infrastructure facilities, with a minimum area of less than 50,000 hectares, that take about 25% of the forest territories, and only 6% belong to this category, forests that are not that much damaged. But now the figures show that by 2019, as a reduction constituted 10%, and mainly that happened where the areas of the forests that are not that much disturbed in Irkutsk region were affected, were exposed to wild fires. And we know that's a big problem over the past few years. And the forests, less disturbed forests in the European part, mainly are affected by cutting of the forest. What is the role of forests that are not that much disturbed in the ecosystem level? The less disturbed forests are in the center of the diagram. We see that there are many functions. First is biodiversity, because they are the storage place for numerous flora and fauna species. Definitely, there are other ecosystem services, that is water regulation, purification and cleaning of the ambient air, absorption of impurities, etc. So all in all, that makes up for the functions that have their effect on people's health. So from the point of climate, we are speaking about a long-term storage of carbon. The less disturbed forests have a large stock of carbon, much more than other types of forests. So if we start cutting this forest, that will be lost, both in all components of the forest, and adaptational potential. I will not go deep into this area, but any successful adaptation may happen only through diversification, through diversity. That's why I say that maximum diversity is something that we have in high concentration is in less disturbed forests. Thus, they have the highest adaptational potential for climate changes and for other man-made factors. Now, if we look at the political level of importance of less disturbed forests, we also see that they're in the crux of several international initiatives, Convention of Biodiversity, Convention on combating desertification, because without forests, nothing is possible, and also Framework Convention of UN, and all that under the auspices of the Millennium Development Goals. And if Russia wants to pursue the path of sustainable development, then the issue of less disturbed forests should be tackled at the level of the national level. The total stock that we have assessed through the report presented by the authorities was 34.6 billion tons of carbon. And primarily we speak about soil, enormous stock, 95% of stock of carbon in less disturbed forests fall into these regions, mainly Krasnoyarsk, Yakutia, Irkutsk, Khabarov region, etc. Just for you to imagine the volume, if we lose these forests, what will be the volume of emission of CO2 into the atmosphere? That will be more than 50 billion tons of CO2. That means that equals the total volume of anthropogenic emissions in Russia during 20 years. Without the diesel sector. So thus it is very important to preserve this type of forests. And we need to look at measures at different levels. At the regional level, and a monitoring system should be envisaged, which is not in place currently, not only to look at their total acreage, but also their current condition. Vladimir Morozov said that there should be a prohibition on industrial or commercial felling, both at the regional level and the federal level. At the national level, we are working on a package of documents. I'm more familiar with climatic package, and you can contribute to that. Long-term strategy till 2050 for the low level of green gas emission, and one of that components is preservation of carbon stock in less disturbed forests. The National Plan for Adaptation that will start functioning since 2023, reduction of green gas emissions as a result of deforestation and forest degradation. And that's something, and we still have not passed the plan on the reduction of green gas emissions that happen because of this factor. Well, it is important to have this in the national plan for preservation of less disturbed forests, preservation of biodiversity, and plan and strategy should be developed on that. And Ministry of Natural Resources should also work on that. And it is natural that we should envisage some article or clause or rewording a new version of the forest code, and I think that this topic will be covered in the papers presented today. And international level, I'm very happy that my colleagues, including Dr. Jason Funk, is with us today. We have discussed more than once at negotiations the problem of less disturbed forests. So I think that it's time to speak about these measures, be that within the framework of Convention on Biodiversity or under the UN relevant commission, but some international agreements should be passed that will testify to the want, to the desire to protect forests that are less disturbed. Thank you.
Спасибо большое, Анатольевна. Так, тут есть. Большое спасибо. Продолжим мы выступлениями двух иностранных коллег. Слово предоставим Антонио Донато Нобре. Это Институт космических исследований Сан-Паулу, Бразилия. Антонио изучает взаимодействие лесов и атмосферы и расскажет нам, к чему приводит сведение лесов Амазонки. Первый. Так, сейчас, секундочку.
Can you hear me? Excuse me, can you hear me? Right. Hello, hello, can you hear me? Hi, this is Antonio Nobre speaking from Brazil. It is a pleasure to address my Russian colleagues. I want to tell you what is happening in Brazil, especially with the Amazon and the connections between losing forests and climate worsening. We have in Brazil the largest tropical forest in the world. It has been deforested very fast, and we are now reaping the consequences of this deforestation. In 2004, we had the highest ever deforestation rate, which was a scandal. Then the Brazilian government decided to enforce the forest code using the police and the justice system. Consistent interconnected action from the official agencies to control deforestation, and so they did. From 2005 until 2012, deforestation plummeted more than 80%, which showed that the control of deforestation was totally dependent on the enforcement of the law and not the economy. Because the economy was booming, and nonetheless deforestation went down. In 2012, the farmers' lobby in Congress made pressure to relieve the control. So they changed the forest code. The first was to relax demands on private properties in terms of protecting the forests. The second was to pardon deforestation crimes committed until 2008. The pardon conveyed a very powerful message that the crime compensates. From 2012 to 2018, deforestation picked up again. And so deforestation reflected these new policies, which basically disassembled the Ministry of Environment. All the control agencies were curbed, so they could no longer perform their control act. So the new forest code was no longer enforced, and there is a horrific clearing of forest happening in the Amazon right now, and there are consequences. This animation represents 2 years of orbital observations of rainfall by the onboard meteorological radar in the TRMM satellite. Note how much more rain falls over South America in comparison with neighboring oceans. Note also how moisture extends south, feeding the southern part of South America with rainfall. Such transfer of atmospheric moisture became known as rivers in the sky, or the flying rivers. So the main productive areas in South America, where 70% of the GDP is produced, is basically irrigated by the flying rivers coming from the Amazon. The Amazon forest thus function as a biotic pump, which is propelling this flying river, dragging moisture-laden air from the Atlantic Ocean across the continent and then dumping into the productive areas. The abundant waters in the Iguazu Falls, one of the 7 natural wonders of the world, is a testimony of the importance of the Amazon biotic pump to the South America hydrological cycle. Tragically, though, the continual and massive deforestation that is destroying the Amazon biotic pump is weakening and drying up the South American flying rivers. The Iguazu Falls are now reduced to trickle. For the last 2 years, there is a massive drought developing, which geographical shape matches terribly well with the arch of deforestation in the Amazon and with the downwind path of the now faltering flying rivers. The drought has made vegetation flammable, which was ignited by arsonists, leading to horrific firestorms. In the first week of October of 2020, a heat wave have produced temperatures up to 47 degrees Celsius. I end this message by showing the global importance of climate regulating forests. This animation made by Yadvinder Mali and collaborators in Oxford University shows 10 years of satellite observations of photosynthesis. This pulsating graph indirectly reveals that climate regulating forests everywhere are critically necessary for taming climate change. I hope this report can inspire my colleagues in Russia to develop very strong efforts to protect the Russian forests that are so critical to the global biological regulation. I hope that this report can inspire my colleagues in Russia to develop very strong efforts to protect the Russian forests that are so critical to the global biological regulation. Colleagues, thank you, Antonio. By the end of the video, we had some problems with the sound and with the picture, but nevertheless, we've heard the majority of the information, and we saw this very impressive picture of drying up of a wonderful waterfall. The next speech will be made by Juan Salazar from the Colombian University. He's going to talk about the forests, the forestry issues. Good afternoon. My name is Juan Salazar, and I'm going to talk about the tree cover loss. In South America, natural forests are degrading. Approximately one football pitch of forest was wiped off the map practically every year. And can we say that this is now a change, a global change in the cover forest, the forest cover? This is highly important, especially for South America. One of the reasons is that we are sure that the climate on the continent will not remain the same after or as a result of the loss of forests. And there's different data, and but I don't know of a single scientific research that states that there will be no climate change as a result of the loss of forests on the planet. And there is even danger that we will pass on and there will be no turning back soon. The forests are like a heart, pumping moisture into the atmosphere. We have come to the conclusion about the specifics of the Amazon forests. On the right, you see the wind direction from the Atlantic to the Andes. When we watched those lines, followed those lines, we saw that the precipitation was growing exponentially over the forests. This wasn't simply a coincidence. Just because the Amazon forests influence the atmospheric precipitation. And the majority of such precipitation occurs from vaporation. And there is an estimate that the majority of precipitation in balance along the basin of the river on the continent at La Plata, Orinoco, is the foundation and are the forests of the Amazon. We had a serious drought, which caused the death of flora and fauna in the region, and we have proof that this drought was created because of a gap between savanna atmosphere and the forests of the Amazon basin. And the situation is changing for the worse from decade to decade. We see the quantitative indicators connected with our research, and we can see that droughts and arid lands are appearing due to the cuts of forests in the Amazon basin. We don't know yet why, but we know that forests are influencing the climate in the areas where they are situated. Regulation and climate regulation and river basin regulation will allow to preserve the water cycle. The less regulated river basins have more problems with clear water and floods. When we compare those regions, we can see that the more regulated basins are covered by forests, and the climate is basically much better regulated there. There are less surprises in these areas. The idea boils down to the fact that forests have a regulating effect, and due to deforestation, visibility is lost. Natural forests are in the interests of humanity, and the preservation of natural forests is in the interests of humanity. Thank you very much for your attention. А как мне себя выключить?
Спасибо. Очень интересный доклад. Хочу предоставить слово Наталье Васильевне Лукиной, доктору биологических наук, члену-корреспонденту РАН, директору Центра по проблемам экологии и продуктивности лесов РАН. Наталья Васильевна одновременно является главным редактором журнала «Лесоведение» и членом консультативного совета Европейской лесной технологической платформы. Наталья Васильевна, пожалуйста.
Здравствуйте, коллеги. Меня слышно?
Да, вот сейчас слышно, пожалуйста.
Здравствуйте, дорогие коллеги. Экран видно? Экран видно?
Да, видно, все в порядке.
Я благодарю организаторов за возможность выступить с этим докладом. Доклад наш называется «Экосистемные услуги лесов в лесной и смежных политиках». И мой содокладчик, заместитель директора Центра экологии и продуктивности лесов Тебенькова Дарья Николаевна. Мы хотим в своем докладе обратить внимание на экосистемные услуги, о чем уже и Анна Анатольевна говорила. Конечно, сегодня акцент сделан...
In this presentation, I would like to draw your attention to the services that are assigned to forests. It's not only climate regulation, but forests are multifunctional. They fulfill all many functions that come into several categories. Well, there's no... The speaker is not speaking now. That's why there's no translation for the time being.
Наталья Васильевна, я правильно понимаю, что у вас в презентации нет звука?
Нет, есть звук.
Это не ее презентация.
Нет, презентации у меня нет звука. Я просто говорю и показываю слайды.
Well, my presentation was without any sound. I was just showing slides and accompanying them with my explanation, with my comments. That's what the speaker just said. Okay, Natalia, thank you. We're back. So we wanted to draw your attention to the following. Forests are multifunctional. They fulfill all functions that bring together into services, and so climate regulation is one of very important services, but all four categories of services, supporting, ensuring, regulating, and cultural, they're all very important, and they're important when they come together, when there is interconnection between them. When we assess the function of climate regulation, we should not forget also such services as supply with timber, that are commercial forests, for instance. And I will show how important it is. The modern forest management should be focused in good management of all these four services and high level of the interconnection, because it can be both positive and negative. We should keep this in mind, because if we use these services well, then we are better capable of regulating climate. Here is an example of the regulating services that are associated with our topic. The forest eco-regulating function. This is a local level. Different lines correspond with different types of pine forests. These are purple. Purple line shows the pine tree forest with sour soil and blueberry growing there, and we see here the correspondence between the quality of the forests, the type of forest, and the evaporation level. And here is another correlation between the evaporation and the area of flows of rivers that are located on these territories. So the volume of forest management and the level of evaporation is correlated. Although we speak about forest regulating climate regulating forests, we should not forget that they all contribute to this. And the chart on the right shows us the formation of flows within the time span between 10 to 50 years. This chart is a result of simulation that was created by a team of my colleagues. Regulation, carbon cycle regulation. Well, that also determines biodiversity. We know that biodiversity is the basis and actual the basis of all forests.
Здесь насыщенность видами растений. Вы видите, что чем выше разнообразие, тем больше запасы почвенного углерода. То было в хвойно-широколиственных лесах, а здесь в лиловых лесах северо-запада России.
This chart shows us the dependence or the correlation between the pool of...
То есть взаимозависимость всех этих экосистемных услуг между собой. И вот мы в этом докладе хотим подчеркнуть, поскольку речь идет и о формировании новой повестки дня в отношении лесной политики, что экосистемные услуги лесов необходимо отразить, да, как приоритет в лесной политике, в том числе, конечно, регулирование климата, но необходимо решать вопрос согласованности лесной политики со смежными политиками, а именно природоохранная, климатическая, энергетическая политика. Для эффективного обеспечения всеми экосистемными услугами лесов, в том числе регулирования климата. То есть вот здесь вот эти смежные политики, они должны быть согласованы. Мы провели такой анализ в рамках тоже проектов лесной и смежных политик в отношении экосистемных услуг лесов. Поставили два таких вопроса. Каким образом цели климатической и энергетической политики, связанные с экосистемными услугами лесов, интегрируются с существующей политикой природоохранного лесного сектора на национальном уровне в России? И каким образом эта политика имплементируется на более низких региональном и локальном уровнях? Для этого анализировали от 2 до 5 ключевых документов в каждой области из этих 4 политик. Проводили анализ так называемых горизонтальных связей между этими 4 политиками. И, в общем, получилось, что интеграция, согласованность всех 4 политик не выявлена ни в одном случае, но прослеживается...
So the integration of all 4 components is very important. And we do not have that much time here to go deep into 4 policies, but they're all integrated and they're all coordinated between themselves. And that's something that we need to work on. And there's also synergy seen between their goals set in policies, but also there are some conflicting areas. And vertical links are also present. The level of vertical integration and is very strong in Russia just because of the vertical links that exist and balance of powers that we have. For instance, in the energy policy, the level of agreement between different levels is very weak. And as for the climate policy, it is nearly non-existent. Adaptation to climate changes, that's what we focus on today. Naturally, we need to speak about the preservation of biodiversity in old growth forests or frontier forests. They were mentioned that the concept of a new forest code that was developed, that was drawn by the research, by the forest committee, and it is suggested that old growth forests should be given a special role and special clause in the
в зонах эксплуатационных лесов, например, и в защитных лесах. То есть тоже нужно выделять и нужно законодательно закреплять как-то сохранение этих лесов.
But attention should be given not only to the old forest, but so-called wild forests, and also we should work on preserving biodiversity, because all types of forests are responsible for climate regulation. That's what I mentioned before. Article 115 of the Forest Code of the Russian Federation.
Довольно давно уже выделены такие леса, как государственные защитные лесные полосы, леса тундровые.
By the federal law, and this clause envisages different types of different types of forests, and maybe old growth old growth forest should be included in this particular clause of the forest code, and that's what I wanted to draw your attention to. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Lukina. Before we get to the next paper, to the next to the presentation of our foreign guests, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that due to the instability of internet connection, just keep that in mind. Anastassia Makarieva, whom you can see in the chat. There are links to the broadcast, and then you can watch these videos later. Now I'd like to give the floor to Jan Pokorny, Cheban, Czech Republic, who is exploring the influence of forests on energy flow, on the service of Earth, and he will give the situation in Czechlands as an example. The floor is yours.
Доброе утро, меня зовут Ян Покорный. Солнечной энергии в зеленых, живых и мертвых лесах. Выражаю огромное.
Давай, попробуем еще разок.
We will try to launch once again the video, since Mr. Pokorny is participating in the conference in the form of video address. Good afternoon. My name is Jan Pokorny. I will speak on distribution of the solar energy in the living and dead mature forests. I express my thanks to my colleagues who have prepared the presentation in the Russian language. First, the sun. The sun hits the planet at about 260,000 degrees. Without sun energy, the atmosphere would be solid. So we ask, what do we have with the solar energy? Can we manage the landscape? Well, all sunshine provides us with 1,000 watt per square meter. Cloudy weather several times less. And then we also have a heat of water. 1 liter of water, when evaporated, it takes 0.7 kilowatt per hour, which is comparable with the capacity of one battery. This chart shows that 1 liter being evaporated energy is consumed, and then we have more than 1,000 watt vapor. And the next picture shows the solar radiation during sunny day and in a cloudy day. And the next picture shows the monthly total amount of solar radiation in January, February, and we see how it changes during different times. And it is much less than in July. Now we see trees. Let us see what's happening with the solar energy. On the pavement, the intensity of solar energy is 877 watt per square meter, and surface temperature is 51 degree. But in the shade, there is 82 watt per square meter, and temperature is 27. And trees cool themselves with evaporated water, and they evaporate about 22 liters per hour, 20 times less, and then it's about 0.7 kilowatt hour. The next picture shows us the temperature, surface temperature in our agricultural landscape in a sunny day. We see that the water area and wetland has temperature less than 30 degrees, and the mowed grass and asphalt are heated over 40 degrees. And what happens with water and air on over dry land? The dry land on sunshine has surface temperature between 45 to 60 degrees. Air goes up and takes water from the surrounding area, and pilots are very well aware of this, and they have studied that in their textbooks. The next two photos show how turbulent thermic flow is created over the warm land, and how air is sucked from the ambient atmosphere. It takes up and creates turbulent heat, and thus we lose moisture. The next picture shows forest. In the forest, the temperature is lower at the lower stories and higher at the ground. It is just the opposite in a cornfield, where there is the soil is not covered with anything. Now we'll go to Shumava Mountains, where a big bark beetle just brought devastation to the whole forest. And this is the situation in the mountains at the height of 1,300 meters. Here it is unbelievable, but the temperature here is up to 70 degrees. This picture shows a living forest where bark beetle was controlled. The temperature here is less, about 30 degrees Celsius. The picture was taken on the same day and with the same level of solar energy, with the same exposure to it. The next picture shows differences in the temperatures in the living adult mature forest and forest that was devastated by bark beetle. 100 square kilometers of dead forest represent that was destroyed by bark beetle. The video got stuck, sorry.
На 100 квадратных километрах мертвого леса процесс испарения изменился. Выделяется 40 тысяч мегаватт тепла, что составляет 40 гигаватт явного тепла.
Well, these maps show clear areas with a high level of temperature. We also can study the situation using satellite pictures.
Снимки мы видим, как скрытое тепло уменьшалось, а явное тепло увеличивалось.
And we see that this picture shows how latent heat went down and sensible heat went up during 20 years when while the forest was dying. And the last picture shows that there are examples of what we can do when deforestation of the landscape is happening. No sound, sorry.
Доброе утро. Градусов. 9 излучение состоит 89, где короедный план.
And this is these are the pictures of 100 square kilometers of dead forest that represents the shift in evaporation. It is the sensible heat of 40,000 megawatt, which is 40 gigawatt sensible heat. These pictures show us the level of energy and
На последнем слайде приведены примеры последствий осушения земель
in the forest, the
на площади 18 тысяч квадратных километров. Это приводит к высвобождению 9 тысяч гигаватт.
So the latent heat went down and sensible heat went up during 20 years when the forest was dying. The last picture shows that there are examples of what we do when we drain and deforest the landscape. When rapeseed and wheat are harvested in our country on 18,000 square kilometers, it represents shifts of 9,000 gigawatts. During last 200 years in North America, 1 million square kilometers wetland were converted into agricultural fields, and that means the release of 118,000
остается еще одна секунда, чтобы попрощаться.
70 years of forest. The forest was removed in East Africa from 50% to 2%. That is the message that we have with water and forests and drainage. And I would like to thank you for the attention that you pay to this issue. Goodbye. Unfortunately, we are challenged with technical issues, and there are problems with communication, technical link, and all videos that were presented here can be followed through the link that was included in the chat. Now I give the floor to Douglas Sheil.
Douglas Sheil, the critical influence of the forests on the water cycle on the stabilization of climate. Hello,
Сегодня я хочу поговорить о воде. Мне кажется, вода интересует каждого. Всем известно, насколько важен надежный доступ к воде для всего, что нам не безразлично. Если у нас нет воды, жизнь становится практически невозможной. Вместе с тем, во многих регионах мира сокращается доступ. Мы наблюдаем также последствия засухи и временного сокращения доступа к воде. Это приводит к тяжелым последствиям во многих частях света. Итак, откуда же берется вода? По большей части из осадков. Здесь я вам вкратце продемонстрирую глобальный круговорот воды. Здесь будет 1000 кубических километров в год.
Коллеги, но, к сожалению, вот так работает Zoom, такими накладками сейчас.
On the surface of the planet, we see 113 cubic kilometers of 113,000 cubic meters of precipitation. 40,000 cubic meters per year is water that is evaporated from the surface of the ocean and is then channeled into the atmosphere. But the majority of it is the water that evaporates from the terrestrial surfaces and then falls down in the form of rain. These recycled water vapor transport is highly important. Of course, not every part of the planet is the same, but we have a number of high-tech data from satellites as of 10 years previously that give us the data on the movement of moisture over the oceans. We have a minute-by-minute data from year to year, and connecting this data with the
Очень тяжело связать все эти данные, но я сейчас попробую.
planet.
Мы здесь справа видим масштаб
I will,
цветов, где синий говорит о том, что вода приходит
no
с
sound.
поверхности океана, а
I
третий
will give
цвет
you a short review of such an analysis, which is quite old but quite accurate. We see the scale and
Земли испарилась и
spectrum of colors where
Таким
blue
образом, здесь мы наблюдаем, что определенные территории очень сильно зависят
and recirculating precipitation accounts for 10 to 20% of water. Blue goes goes on to become green and yellow, where 50% of the yellow color, and then passes on to yellow 70-80% of precipitation. That is moisture that appears from the surface of the earth. And the question appears, where do those recirculating rains come from? These are the global data. You can see that the main source of the terrestrial evaporation is forests. And this is quite logical, because evaporating from the ground, the water falls back onto the ground, which is shown in blue.
Мы видим, что основные источники находятся в тропической Африке, тропической
Evaporating from the surface of the land will again fall onto the land in another part of the world. We see that the main sources are situated in the tropical Africa and tropical South America. I also wanted to reiterate that we know that a lot of moisture that evaporates from land depends on vegetation. As to particular figures, we continue to argue, but the mean figure is 60% of humidity or moisture is evaporated from vegetation. And we now understand what role vegetation plays for the future generations and for atmospheric moisture. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, colleagues. That was a very interesting presentation. And now I would like to give the floor to Makarieva Anastassia Mikhailovna, the representative of the Physics Institute in St. Petersburg. Anastassia Mikhailovna will tell us about the interdependence of less disturbed forests and cloudiness. Okay. Have we got Anastassia with us? Anastassia Mikhailovna, are you with us? I can see the icon, but I cannot see you. Anastassia Mikhailovna, unfortunately, is not with us for the time being. Let's try to switch her on again. Andrei Vladimirovich, are you with us? Andrei Vladimirovich, are you with us now?
Тогда предлагаю двигаться дальше. послушаем еще наших иностранных коллег. Я думаю, что Анастасия Михайловна за это время...
Mr. Nefiodov. Then let's move on. Let's listen to our foreign colleagues. I hope that we can switch on the video. I'd like to invite Mr. Ugo Bardi, University of Florence, Club of Rome, the author of the reports on deforestation. And we're going to talk on the functions of the stabilizing functions of forests. Mr. Ugo Bardi, you're welcome. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to be here. This is Ugo Bardi from Italy, and I'll be telling you something about how to use models to understand the role of forests and, in general, of the biosphere in maintaining the homeostasis of Earth system. As you all know, this is a very serious, complicated problem, very difficult one, and we try to do our best. We have physics, we have data, and we need models to understand how the various elements of the system are arranged together. So we need dynamic models. We know something about the system we're studying, which is a big ball, which is partly blue and partly green. And basically, we want it to remain where it is. We don't want it to change too much. And incidentally, this is in itself a model of the Earth. It is, of course, a very simple model, and it is static. It doesn't tell you how the system evolves and what makes it move, but it's a starting point. Then from here, you can go far into the modeling in various ways, and you'll know probably as well as I do that there's a problem with models. They tend to become too complicated. It is what I call creeping complexity. People like models. They think that models can tell them useful things, how to behave, how to predict the future, what to do to manage complex systems. But it's difficult. The future is difficult to predict. And very often models become too complex so much that people cannot understand them anymore, except, and sometimes not even that, the people who made them, who can work with them, which is not so easy in the case of climate model. Now we are in the situation in which we badly need to act on the system, which means to stop changes, which we don't want to happen. But the problem, one of the several problems we have, is how to pass to the policymakers the situation, the essential elements of the situation. Of course, policymakers cannot be specialized in computer modeling, but we need to be able to pass them at least the basic ideas. That what I think we need a concept that was developed several years ago by an American researcher called Seymour Papert, which he called mind-sized models, mind, human mind, normal human mind, that we need models for which we can be managed and understood by normal people, like policymaker, like you and me, like us, intended as human beings, not as scientists. So, can we make models simple models? Yes, we can. It's a challenge. We have to work on that. We have to do something on that, to convey basic ideas. And I think the main point that we can discover, which has some so clear in the debate, which is all based on the models are right and models are not right. Of course, we know it processes sunlight. Sunlight is turned into heat by photosynthesis, but this process is complicated by other factors. Photosynthesis can occur only if it has a continuous supply of water and CO2.
Это кислород и углерод, которые поступают из воды, плюс СО2, который поглощается из атмосферы. Это сложный и активный процесс. Вы уже знаете, что леса могут закачивать воду из океанов. Это красивая концепция биотического...
And CO2 outgas from the atmosphere. It's a complex and active process. You already know that
СО2 из
forests
геосферы.
can pump water out. This is the concept, the beautiful concept of the biotic pump. It is less known, but just as important. The forests do not really pump CO2 out of the geosphere. There is no active process of pumping, but they process the CO2, which is outgas from the geosphere, and this is CO2. And this CO2 is transformed by the photosynthesis into forms of carbon, which are solid, live, kerogen, charcoal, fossil fuels, kerogen, charcoal, fossil fuels, which are sent back to the crust. The biosphere, in the form of forests, mainly makes these cycles possible, so it is a fundamental element as well, as we all know, in the homeostasis of the system. The system couldn't be homeostatic. Well, if it's not for its forests, at least one of its fundamental elements which can do this cycle, and these cycles restabilize systems. So this is the basic message we should convey. And I think our task is to find ways to do that in ways which are policy understandable for politicians. And thank you for your attention.
Так, у нас Анастасия Михайловна, я понимаю, что подключилась обратно. Так, мы ее видим. Так.
Now we will give the floor to Anastassia Makarieva.
Вот, вижу. Ага. Анастасия Михайловна, пожалуйста, вам слово. Еще раз слово представляется.
Okay, the floor is yours. So once again, we give the floor to Anastassia Makarieva, Doctor of Physics and Mathematics, Senior Researcher of St. Petersburg Institute of Nuclear Energy. The floor is yours. Dear colleagues,
Со связью записала ролик. Сейчас мы попробуем включить его.
There's very poor sound coming. Sorry, no sound, no signal.
Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги. Меня зовут Анастасия Макарева. Я из Петербургского института ядерной физики.
My name is Anastassia Makarieva. I'm from St. Petersburg Research Institute of Nuclear Energy. My previous My colleagues spoke about the importance of photosynthesis, about evaporation, and about moisture, which are also all very important elements. But I will speak here.
Почему? Облака одновременно нагревают и охлаждают землю.
Forests and cloudiness, those are the missing links in fighting fighting for.
Какой эффект доминирует, зависит от множества условий. Это очень сложные процессы. Но если мы упростим, то можно сказать, что высокая тонкая облачность, прозрачная для солнечного света, преимущественно нагревает, а низкая облачность, которая отражает солнечный свет, она преимущественно охлаждает. Что происходит в России в последние десятилетия? Два процесса. Во-первых, мы видим, что быстро исчезают малонарушенные леса. Мы это видим по спутниковым данным. Вот здесь красным показано, сколько мы потеряли малонарушенных лесов за последние 20 лет, а зеленый то, что еще остаются. И во-вторых, мы это видим по неуклонно омолаживающимся древостоям. Что это значит? Когда мы вырубаем малонарушенный лес, где присутствуют деревья всех возрастов, он заменяется на вырубке молодыми деревцами. Поэтому омоложение древостоя указывает на исчезновение малонарушенных лесов. Это первый процесс. Второй процесс – это уменьшается количество низкой облачности, то есть той самой стабилизирующей облачности, которая должна была бы охлаждать наш стремительно нагревающийся континент. Итак, два процесса, но они изучаются разными людьми, между которыми зачастую нет никакой связи. Имеет ли это влияние на климатическую систему Земли? В последние пару лет в климатическом сообществе произошла тихая, растянутая во времени, но сенсация. Оказалось, что наиболее продвинутые модели последнего поколения, которые лучше всего и более детально учитывают облачность, стали показывать существенно большее потепление, предсказывать при удвоении СО2, чем это было раньше. Вот на этой картинке каждая строчка соответствует какому-то научному центру какой-то модели. Внизу 5-е поколение, вверху 6-е. И мы видим, длина линии соответствует предсказываемому потеплению. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 градусов. Синий цвет – потепление из-за выбросов СО2, красный – изменение альбедо, и желтый – это облачность. 2 тона – это в тропиках и вне тропиков на высоких широтах. И мы видим, что вот это вот учет облачности, он в последних новейших моделях превосходит вклад выбросов СО2. То есть, если бы мы знали, как остановить вот эти процессы, связанные с облачностью, то мы могли бы очень существенно стабилизировать и предотвратить
evaporation. And if we could overcome cloudiness levels, then it would be possible to prevent further warming up. But what is the danger of the fragmented approach when there is no association, or there is no interconnection between those who study climate, study things in practice? Just an example. Historically, we began to study carbon absorption. We know that carbon would get into atmosphere, and that would bring the coming atmosphere to a deterioration, because it will cause a warming up. And
будет снег, а не
and if
древесный покров, солнце
if snow is dark, if snow is
им земля остынет, охлаждение, хорошо. То есть сложили в моделях охлаждение, хорошо. То есть сложили в моделях плюс с минусом, погрешности большие, но получили 0. Нет влияния леса на климат. Лес не важен. А что это значит? Это значит, что лес просто возобновимый ресурс. Вы такой позиции не услышите, вот так четко артикулируемой, однако она лежит в основе того, что реально происходит. И в последние годы за счет на волне перехода к возобновимым источникам энергии мы видим, что резко выросла площадь ежегодно вырубаемых лесов по всей Европе. Вот это зеленые столбики. И одновременно выросли и пожары. Это желтые столбики. Это в Европе, где доступность к лесам во много превосходит то, что мы...
renewable sources of energy from the floor. We see the situations that the situation with wildfires is becoming more and more grave in Russia because of deforestation and because of drying of river flows, and this makes soil more and more dry. And trees that are weakened by droughts are an easier target to bark beetles, and thus we launch a vicious circle of self-destruction and destruction of the climatic system. The fundamental science should take a very clear, should form a very clear concept of studying climate and understanding of the climate regulating function of forests. Do you understand it as a biological object or only ecological object, and or do we take some other approach? There should be a global understanding that forests are global stabilizers of forest, and what we are doing now looks like a large-scale suicide. We need to stabilize climate. We need to stabilize forests. We do not know the effects of deforestation on climate in full. But if we ignore the role of natural forests in climate regulation, climate collapse. To avoid this, we need to protect the remaining forests, old-grown forests, and ensure long-term protection of them. And also, we should have a program to study the reasons of the
сегодня лежит ответственность не только перед самими собой, но и перед всем человечеством. Спасибо.
Disappearing. Russia is one of the rare countries undisturbed every possible effort to protect them for the sake of the whole humanity. Thank you. Anastassia Mikhailovna, it looks like we managed to this part of the presentation. And now I will give the floor to Dr. Jason Funk. Jason Funk is one of the is a founder of Land Use and Climate Knowledge Initiative from Chicago, USA, and he will speak about the notion of stable forests and how to preserve. And so the video will go on in English with translation into Russian. If there's some complex with a technical line or with a signal, then we hope that everyone understands in English and they will hear that.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jason.
Hello. I welcome everyone.
An organization called the Land Use, based in Chicago. I want to tell you today a little bit about a paper that was published in 2019. And I feel that this paper is especially better forest and climate, shaping. However, authors of that paper, all of us were in develop area of forest we felt had been overlooked in climate policy, especially, which is the role of stable forests that are. Topic seemed very relevant to us in the context of cooperation on forests, as well as the Paris Climate Agreement. So I hope you'll find that it's relevant to Russian forests today. Started as a conversation at a workshop convened by my colleague Nikolai Aguilar-Amachastagui. We got together and began exploring ideas that had originally been developed and published by Russian forest scientist Peter Potapov using the term intact forests. And the co-authors felt that this type of forest had been overlooked and was not receiving the kinds of attention it deserved, in climate agreements especially, and that had implications for resources flowing to these forests to be able to keep them in the state that they're in now. We developed an analytical framework for this paper in 3 key steps. The first step was that among the authors, we articulated and described 5 key policy attributes that we thought would be necessary for effective policies that could preserve these stable forests. Those attributes are to anticipate the risks, to be able to incorporate the broader value of these forests, to allocate resources to these forests, sustain the efforts over time, and to monitor the outcomes effectively. After developing these attributes, we were able to link them in a second step to a much broader framework for managing common property resources that was developed by Eleanor Ostrom based on case studies from around the world. Our third step then was to identify the gaps where the current policies fell short of achieving these principles and attributes. This table shows the main results of that effort. On the left-hand side, you can see the 5 policy attributes that I mentioned earlier. Then across the horizontal axis, you can see the 4 different policy contexts we evaluated: international climate agreements, national climate policies, donor-supported land management planning, and voluntary activities among non-state actors. I've used color coding here to give you the quick takeaway from this table. You can see that in red, the areas where we found these policy attributes were completely missing. In yellow, you see the areas where there was mixed performance. And in green, you see the areas where we judged there was good performance. The problem here is that so much of this table is red and yellow, when in fact, we would expect that the whole thing should be green. That would be the goal, and that's the task ahead. What we concluded based on those findings is that the current approach for delivering climate finance to forests is incomplete. Over the past decade or so, we've seen a huge effort to allocate resources at reducing deforestation and forest degradation. And it's expected that those resources would ramp up over time, and then once they've achieved success, that they could decline. However, the authors of the paper believe that there is a necessity for a second track of finance. That track could start off much smaller, but over time it would build up and then be sustained in order to continue to keep these forests intact, performing their ecological function and their climate benefits over time. One area of work that has followed from our Stable Forest paper is the development of something called the Forest Landscape Integrity Index. This is intended to provide a globally consistent index of those factors that relate to ecological integrity of forests. And the findings of that paper, which are yet to be published, show that there's still extensive areas of high integrity forests in Russia, and we think this is going to be an important area to continue to focus on in the future. With that, I will.
Коллеги, спасибо. У нас вот перевод был только с самого начала, может быть, у кого-то он был и до самого конца, но тем не менее, история понятная. Действительно хорошие аргументы о необходимости сохранения устойчивых лесов. Коллеги, дальше слово предоставляем Нефедову Андрею Владимировичу, доктору физмат-наук, ведущему научному сотруднику Петербургского института ядерной физики имени Константинова, Национального исследовательского центра Курчатовский институт. Андрей Владимирович расскажет про естественные малонарушенные леса и проблемы изменения окружающей среды и климата, взаимозависимости. Андрей Владимирович, пожалуйста.
Так, мою картинку видно?
Да, видно.
Добрый день. Я Андрей Нефедов из Петербургского института ядерной физики. Значит, очень важно следующее. Решение проблемы изменения глобального климата зависит от правильного понимания фундаментальных принципов функционирования биосферы и места человека в ней. Сегодня сложилась в науке такая ситуация, когда есть две взаимоисключающие точки зрения на взаимоотношения биоты, флоры и фауны биосферы и окружающей ее среды. Первая точка зрения состоит в том, она традиционная, состоит в том, что окружающая среда случайно задана в некотором состоянии, пригодном для жизни. Биота приспосабливается к любой окружающей среде, адаптируется, и выделенных для жизни внешних условий не существует. Это первая точка зрения. Вторая точка зрения получила название концепции биотической регуляции, и она состоит в том, что окружающая среда формируется самой биотой, причем в том состоянии, которое наиболее пригодно для жизни. В отсутствии внешних возмущений окружающей среды поток органики, синтезированной автотрофами, компенсируется обратным потоком неорганических веществ от разлагающих органику гетеротрофов. При наличии возмущений живые организмы функционируют так, чтобы компенсировать возникающие неблагоприятные изменения и вернуть среду в первоначальное оптимальное состояние. Биосфера сохраняет свою устойчивость только если возмущение не превышает некоторого предельно допустимого порогового значения. То есть сейчас фактически ситуация сложилась так, как в XVI веке, когда люди имели старую картину геоцентрической системы мира Птолемея И появился Коперник, который предложил совершенно другую систему гелиоцентрическую. Хотя для обывателя совершенно все равно, что вокруг чего вращается Солнце вокруг Земли или Земля вокруг, значит, Земля вокруг Солнца. Для фундаментальной науки это совершенно принципиальная вещь. И только то есть, в основе тех представлений, конечно, было важным фактом то, что Солнце имеет большую массу, меньшую отдачу, и, соответственно, надо было систему отсчета связывать с Солнцем. И только в этом случае удалось создать согласованную картину, которая послужила дальнейшему развитию науки и, в конечном счете, открытию закона всемирного тяготения. Важно понять, что биота и окружающая среда – это две стороны одного явления, которое называется жизнью. И с точки зрения физики или химии, окружающая среда без дополнительного специального биотического контроля может изменить характеризующие параметры на порядке величины, то есть распаться на временах порядка нескольких лет. То, что этого не происходит, значит, говорит о том, что есть специальный механизм, который удлиняет время жизни. Вот посмотрим по углероду. Известные оценки. Значит, мы знаем, что запас неорганического углерода в атмосфере и органического углерода в почве и океане составляет 1000 гигатонн. Чистая продуктивность биоты суши и океана тоже сейчас известна. Это 100 гигатонн С в год. Она примерно делится поровну между сушей и океаном. То есть суша и океан имеют примерно равную мощность. И действуют примерно как равные энергетические равные партнеры по мощности. Так вот, если мы допустим, что синтез органики происходит без разложения, или наоборот разложение органики без синтеза, то мы видим, что время разрушающей среды оказывается 10 лет. То есть для этого достаточно разделить запас углерода 1000 гигатонн на 100 гигатонн в год, то есть на скорость, с какой эта биота ее преобразует. То есть за 10 лет значит, она меняет, и это время, 10 лет это цикл, за который происходит смена вот, биологически активных веществ, биогенов, так называемых. То есть то, что нет распада на временах 10 лет, говорит о том, что биота способна продлить время распада окружающей среды на времена порядка времени самой жизни, то есть миллиарды лет. Антропогенные выбросы углерода от сжигания ископаемого топлива составляют величину порядка 9 гигатонн С в год. К этому добавляется разрушение органических запасов биосферы за счет деградации почв и уничтожение лесов. Это 2 гигатонны С в год. Суммарно мы имеем глобальные выбросы углерода на уровне 11 гигатонн С в год. И сегодня в атмосфере накапливается избыточный углерод в виде парникового газа СО2 порядка 5 гигатонн углерода в год, и эта величина растет со временем. То есть полной утилизации углерода не происходит. А не происходит это в силу того, что большая часть суши уже освоена. И естественные наземные экосистемы нарушены. Биота уже не только не справляется с компенсацией антропогенных нарушений, она сама дестабилизирует окружающую среду. Посмотрим по круговороту воды. Известно, что средняя высота суши над уровнем моря составляет величину около 870 метров. Огромная величина. За счет гравитации все запасы пресной воды на суше могли бы стечь за речной сток и в океан в течение нескольких лет. Но реки текут вечно. То есть осадки, приносимые с океана на материк, компенсируют речной сток в океан. И вот эту работу против сил гравитации выполняет растительный покров суши. Более точно, это могут выполнить только естественные или малонарушенные, находящиеся на поздних стадиях сукцессии лесные экосистемы. потому что они обладают для этого полным набором необходимых для этой работы биологических видов. Важно подчеркнуть, что искусственные леса плантации не имеют таких функций. Конечно, можно обсуждать определения малонарушенных, естественных, то есть есть некое определение, некоторые критерии там, по площади там, и так далее. С этим можно работать. Но важная вещь состоит в том, что естественные или малонарушенные лесные экосистемы, они обладают рядом свойств, имеют выделенные свойства. Поэтому для экологической эффективности лесов нужно классифицировать леса по степени их нарушенности. И одним из важных свойств этих систем является то, что они являют мозаичную структуру окон на разной стадии зарастания. Они сохраняют собственную устойчивость, и они выполняют важнейшую экологическую функцию по регуляции окружающей среды и климата. Причем делает это с максимальной возможной эффективностью. Лес, который подвергнут сильным нарушениям, он нестабилен. Он подвержен вредителям, болезням, пожарам. Он расходует всю мощность на самовосстановление, поэтому его потенциал по регуляции окружающей среды подавлен. Точно так же, как ребенок не может выполнить функции высококвалифицированного работника. При запороговых нарушениях такой лес превращается в дестабилизатор окружающей среды. Мы видели, какую мощность, какую продуктивность имеет биота. 100 гигатонн СО в год. 100 гигатонн. А антропогенные выбросы 10, на порядок меньше. То есть мощность биоты на порядок превышает мощность, с которой мы выбрасываем этот углерод в атмосферу. Посмотрим распределение потребления первичной продукции гетеротрофами, то есть те, кто разлагает органику, в зависимости от размера тел. Так вот, оказывается, что это распределение, оно имеет универсальный характер для экосистем океана и суши. Вот этот график здесь нарисован, приведен. Значит, на оси X приведены размеры тела, а по оси Y, значит, это потребляемая доля потоков энергии. 100% это полная величина первичной продукции, 100 гигатонн С. Так вот, оказывается, что подавляющая доля энергетических потоков вещества, то есть вещество можно считать в энергетических единицах, подавляющая доля энергетических потоков пропускается через бактерии и грибы в лесных наземных экосистемах, и в океане это бактерии и микрозоопланктон. Порядка 90%. То есть основная нагрузка на стабилизацию лежит вот на микроорганизмах. 10% приходится на беспозвоночных, насекомые и так далее. Вот. И только 1% энергетических потоков отводится позвоночным, включая млекопитающих, в том числе человеку. Потребление энергии на пороговом уровне 1% от 100 гигатонн С в год составляет 1 гигатонну углерода в год. Сюда включается пища людей,
So these are the flows of energy, 90% for bacteria and fungi, 10% and 1% respectively for the mammals and well, just 1% for humans. This is the energy. The energy consumption, we are currently just redistributing those energy flows and take them.
Именно глобальное разрушение естественных экосистем определяет наблюдаемую потерю устойчивости регионального и глобального климата и наблюдаемые климатические катаклизмы. Единственный путь сохранения пригодной для жизни окружающей среды и климата – это восстановление естественных лесных экосистем, причем в размере, достаточном для компенсации всех антропогенных возмущений. Накопленные на сегодняшний день экспериментальные данные полностью подтверждают предсказания концепции биотической регуляции. У меня все, спасибо.
Коллеги, спасибо. Из запланированных докладов у нас все. Несмотря на определенные технические сложности, мне кажется, получилось довольно любопытно. Сейчас предлагаю дать еще несколько коротких выступлений коллегам без презентаций. И давайте, я так понимаю, что академик Ваганов Евгений Александрович не сумел подключиться, да? Не вижу его, он планировал. Хорошо, если он появится, мы ему слово дадим. Значит, Стариков Иван Валентинович. Так, тоже пока не видим. Хорошо. Тогда, так, у нас Yaroshenko есть. Есть.
Let's then let's go on to Mr. Yaroshenko, Alexey Yurievich. I'd like to give the floor to my colleague, Alexey Yurievich Yaroshenko, the head of the Forest Department of Greenpeace in Russia. Thank you very much, colleagues. A lot has been said about the importance of the preservation of less disturbed forests, and I wouldn't like to repeat and add anything to my colleagues. But on the other hand, the most important thing is that we need to preserve the forests. On the other hand, the forestry sector and our industry is dependent on commercial forests. In other words, we have to somehow redistribute those funds. This needs a lot of change in the legal department, in the laws and in legislation, and the changes of the Forest Code. I'd like to remind you that the Forest Code of 2006 is based on the assumption that forests are used as the grounds for harvesting timber. In other words, nothing is presupposing the system that will compensate for the loss of forests. And if we don't change this system, we will not be able to preserve natural forests. In order to change this system, we need to organize forestry in a completely different way. So these are the aspects that play the most important role for preservation of forests and preservation of life on Earth. On the one hand, we need restrictive measures as to harvesting and cutting of and felling of natural forests. So we need to develop the category which is called the object of forest legacy. And we also need to concentrate on the so-called regulating forests. Natalia Vasilyevna was talking about the concept of the new forest code, where the topic has been raised already. This is one point. The second point we need to make is to develop such forestry in such a way that the natural forests are preserved and the commercial forests are exploited. So we go on to we need to resolve the model of the extensive deforestation. We have to introduce a new plan of forest development and conservation of forests. So this correct and modern forest approach to forestation is highly important, especially in the forests where self-regulation has been disturbed. The second large reserve of the same scale is the previous agricultural lands, the agricultural lands that are not used any longer. So if the plans in accordance with the current program are realized, we will still have 50 million hectares of such lands which are more or less productive as far as forestry is concerned, where we can grow timber in a large amount, just as much as we need for commercial use. So these aspects are highly important in order to preserve the climate regulating forests. So the most important thing is to give a particular status to natural lands, to change the concept of forest management on a governmental level, and also to start planting commercial forests on former agricultural lands. So if we comply with these 3 points, we will be able to preserve natural forests. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you for this. And the concept of goal setting is very important. If it flows in the right directions, then the problem will be managed well. Now, I would like to give the floor to our next speaker, Evgeny Starikov from Research Center of Ecology and Nature. Thank you very much for giving floor to me and for discussing this issue from a little bit different angle. And what Alexey just said, I absolutely agree with the acreage of plowed lands is decreasing now, and they plowlands decreased at some point, and then it got back to its previous level. We are the largest exporters of grain, but no climatic projects and no projects related to the role of forests in climate regulation are possible if the topic of green bonds is not regulated. We know what is happening on the market with the so-called green bonds, with the volume of financial volume that is circulated there. And experts say that forests are our main potential that ensures mitigation in climate changes, and also water turnover, especially on the territories that belong to the strict continental climate. That is virtually the largest part of Eurasian continent. Only 2%, if we look today, are the absorption capacity and water regulating capacity of forests. But if we see what goes particularly on the problem, on the projects from the so-called green financing, we see that not more than 2% are used. Although we all state that forests play a very important role. Thus, we really need to look close on this problem. Very recently, in mid-July 2020, a special group of experts from the European Parliament passed a resolution on the tax regulation. That was the first classifier or categorizer on types of economic activity, and in Europe, at least in Europe, an enterprise will be considered sustainable. It leads at least to one of the goals that lead to sustainability and climate change, in particular. Preservation of forests and their contribution to turnover on the vast territories. Switch to a closed circle economy, prevention of pollution, protection of biosystem, etc. And these key parameters are, 4 of them are associated with the special role of forests in preservation of climate, biodiversity, etc. So I believe that, and I'll be brief, I believe that we need to be prepared to work on our own. We need to form our own agenda, not to just to be in the tail, lagging behind others. So in Glasgow, we need to stand firm with our position, because it is there that the agenda will be formed for the coming 30 years. We need to speak about to be aware of our potential and bring our own agenda. We need to be very active in our actions. And Svetlana believes that it's not only green bonds. The railroad may boast the achievement of switching locomotives and engines on the BAM or Trans-Siberian Railroad from coal engines to electric engines. But the bonds that actually are in the basis of the assessment of the system do not fall under sanctions yet. So for our economy, that may be a way out. Thank you very much, Mr. Starikov. Now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Slatko from to Mr. Shmatkov. I have a couple of comments. In 2013, the government introduced and approved the state policy in preservation and increase of acreage of forests. The points there was about forest heritage, that is special section of forest should be allocated, given the title of national environmental heritage. But during the past 6 years, not a single lot of a piece of forest was given this status, and that's something that we need to correct. I will also suggest that we need to work on terminology. What is less disturbed forest? Because as soon as we start speaking about this at the level of Russian Forestry Agency, they start saying, what is it exactly? Wild forest or regulated forest? We should be very clear about the terminology that we use in a Russian system. And the third point that I want to make is that if there's less disturbed forests are preserved, not only the climatic agenda should be kept in mind, or preservation of biodiversity, but the current functioning enterprises working in forestry should also be involved. We need to keep in mind different interests that are present, and I want to address the scientists that we have here today with us, not to give up from the point of enlightenment. You need to enlighten the powers that be and also people about forests, because they believe, many people believe that old growth of forests is the place where the timber just rottens and stays idle, and this is something that should be used until before the bog beetle eats them up. But there should be a different approach to that. We have 2 more speakers. I would like to give the floor to Jorg Irgender, Australian representative from Australia, with nearly no forests there, unfortunately. Jorg.
Thank you very much. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Can you hear
Please have in mind that we're quite limited in time. 2-3 minutes, please. Oh,
me? Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
go ahead, please.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we do hear you, sir.
I'd like to make 3 points. The first point is humans need to be taught how to behave better. We are the most invasive species on the planet. A friend of mine said if insects became extinct, the world would collapse. If people became extinct, the world would collapse. So that's the first thing I'd like to say. The second thing is there are index of sustainabilities now available, like the index of sustainable functionality, that should be set up for forests. All the speakers have so far talked about the impact of forests on people. What about all the animals and plants, the kangaroos, the wallabies, and everything that died in Australia? They have life too. And the third point I'd like to make is that, you know, simulations are now able to simulate forests at a 100-meter scale resolution and horizontal. So we can have a virtual reality system running, because it's very important that humans get told the response that their actions are having. So unless people see that they're doing damage, they're not going to change. So it's very, very important that we set up a virtual reality system. When the fire brigade goes out to fight a fire, it gets told where to put the water. And the last point I'd like to make is, you know, forests have much more function than just climate change. Trees colonialize, they pump the water in. All of Australia was a forest. And if we just did 2 things, one is we took tidal energy, solar energy, and geothermal energy in Australia, we could service the whole world with energy sustainably 20 times over. Then if we reforested all of Western Australia, which used to be a forest, the world would be back to 1950 levels of CO2. So all these problems are fixable. It's just that people don't seem to have the courage. They're always thinking about themselves and money, money, money. Money is the only thing that seems to count in the world anymore. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to say so in a few words. Finished. Did you hear it?
Спасибо, Jorg.
Thank you very much, Jorg. Now I'd like to give the floor to Marina Mishunkina, Deputy General Director of the publishing house Argumenty Fakti, and also member of the Public Council of the Federal Forestry Agency. And Ms. Mishunkina does a lot to preserve forests. Thank you very much for inviting me for this this conference. You're speaking about the enlightenment function. I represent the publishing house Argumenty Fakti with over 35 million audience in Russia and abroad. We mainly times presented the results and findings of Russian scholars and other international scholars on the role of a forest in regulation and biotic diversity, and their role in preserving the conditions that are good for people living. We see that Science journals article said, quoted Anastassia Makarieva, for instance. He referred to the studies undertaken by Makarieva with her theory of a pump. And for other countries, there's research undertaken by our scientists is considered to be a cutting edge. What can help us, and what can bring together the Argumenty Fakti newspaper and Science magazine. And we are all concerned with our future, with the preservation of disturbed ecosystems and forests. We hope that we will be heard, and this is our mission of enlighteners, because it is the forests that support environment, balance, and that's what we are speaking here today. but to avoid natural catastrophes and to mitigate conflicts between the ecosystem and technosystem. But as a member of the civic society, I should say that we need to have laws. Otherwise, we will lose the balance that it is happening in the Amazon basin. The position presented by Antonio Nobre says is that unlimited cutting of forests that undermines, that ruins this water pump in Brazil, in the Amazon basin, is something that cannot but tell on the whole situation. But when the cutting level was reduced through legal framework, the situation began to improve. And we see that situation can be changed through legislative initiatives and laws passed. It happens in many countries. And environmentally friendly laws should be tough, as many people think, but the future will show whether we were right or not. For instance, there should be a law on water protection, on the protection of the Baikal waters. Some people said that it was a very tough law, but we managed to get to the point that the pulp mill was closed there, and that had a positive effect on the situation in the Baikal Lake. I want to support what Yelena Sharoikina said about eco services of Russian forests, and I support the speakers from Russia, Ms. Romanovskaya, Lukina, and Nefiodov, and others who spoke about the very important role of forests, and maybe this should be done at the legislative level. And thank you very much for your attention.
Yes, thank you very much, colleagues. So I would like to extend my gratitude to all of our foreign colleagues that despite the difference in time are still online and together with us. I'd like to also thank my Russian colleagues, and I suppose that we will continue and even expand the topic or discussion. And Ms. Romanovskaya has pointed out that it is for the first time that we're working in such an extended format. And in conclusion, we would like to say that the conclusions are as follows. The forest provides for the transport of moisture. It is the last actually border line for the preservation of humankind, and has a great influence on the changes of climate. It is one of the regulators of the water on Earth, and forests need a specific legal status. We are going to draw up a document of the round table. We're going to write about the role of forests for the preservation of the environment for the future generations, starting from the carbon sink to the forests as regulators of water balance on the face of Earth. And we are going to negotiate this document with the representatives of the water of today's round table, and we will send the document to the chairman of the State Department of the State Security Department of the Russian Federation. I would like to give my extend my gratitude to all of you, all of those participating today, and a good day to you all. Goodbye. Похоже, что да.